GOPA President Donn Rowe. It is good to see you back here.
Good to see you, Liz.
Okay, so you decided to step it up a notch. We've been talking about this actually for some time. The executive branch moved without the legislative branch, and that's where we are here. So what happened that pushed you to this point?
Well, I think we're at a point right now going into the next legislative session, and the conversations we've had in the communities and with legislators, we believe that this is an opportune time to get our message out there, to show the public that we are supporting their communities, we are supporting their facilities in their communities, and also to bring the stakeholders to the table. This certainly is not an attack on Governor Cuomo. This is a method to restart the conversation, okay. I would like to say.
Okay, well, we have the radio ad, so I just want to take a listen to it real quick, just a little piece.
While Governor Cuomo is focused on New York City, upstate continues to suffer. Instead of reforming bureaucratic waste and overtime costs, the governor wants to shut 4 prisons and several mental health facilities. That will kill hundreds of good-paying jobs and make these institutions even more overcrowded and dangerous. Tell Governor Cuomo, no unilateral prison and mental health closings. Let's protect good jobs and services and not hurt our economy. Paid for by the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association.
Of these institutions.
So, okay, I'm sorry. Just to reiterate, because I don't think people could hear us there over the ad. This does focus on the governor, right? You don't consider this an attack on the governor, and yet the first line is when Governor Cuomo is focused on New York City, upstate continues to suffer. That's not attacking him in your mind.
No, I don't believe it's attacking him. It's pointing out that this is Governor Cuomo's decision. He made it by executive fiat in July of last year,
right,
or this year, and he's the only one that can change this at this point. Obviously, there's legislative people involved, there's communities involved, and when I go to these communities that are hard hit by these institutional closures, they ask me, what can we do? How can we change this? And the only person that can change this is the governor, and we're asking for that conversation to continue.
Yeah, so that's interesting, though, because I've spoken to sort of like a parade of legislators, rank and file folks who've been in here, and even folks who aren't rank and file. For example, Tom Libous, who's the deputy majority leader or the deputy Republican leader in the Senate, and they're all focused on trying to keep their respective facilities open because they're well aware of the jobs and the economic viability of various places upstate. You don't think any of so all of what they're trying to do is for naught? The only person who could change this is the governor. I mean, I guess they're trying to pressure the governor into moving.
Well, this is the governor's decision. The governor, by law, can create these closures to happen by law with a 1-year notification. He doesn't need the legislature,
True.
Which he has proven with the notice coming out in July of last year. But obviously, I believe the governor holds at stake the opinions of the legislature, as well as the public employees, as well as the communities. And we're just looking to restart that conversation to include us, the communities, and the legislature.
You start out by saying he's focused on New York City, and I think that the governor has tried very hard to change that perception. I mean, he spent all of the summer staying away from New York City, traveling all over various parts of upstate, tourism focused mostly. Yesterday, he gave out $715 and change $1 million, most of which went to upstate for economic development. In fact, New York City is upset because they feel like they got the short end of the stick. So what is it that he's focused on with New York City that, in your mind, is shortchanging upstate New York?
Well, I think there's certainly more to upstate than the spot checks that the governor has been doing upstate. Obviously, he's been upstate. He's gone into some areas and some policy areas. That's certainly not my concern, other than as a citizen of the state. But the areas such as your Wayne County or your Franklin County or your Schuyler County that has these facilities and really has nothing else, we can't forget about them. They're a viable part of the economy. They're a viable part of the upstate economy.
But is there something in particular that he's focused on in New York City that you think is misplaced in terms of his attention?
Well, I think we need to shift our attention to what we have and the services we provide. And in my group, the majority of the services that we provide is upstate.
It's budget season, obviously. I mean, what you're doing is trying to influence the governor and the governor's people as they're putting together the 2014-2015 executive budget, which we'll see in January. Everybody is trying to influence that document. Also, what we hear from him first, though, is the state of the state. And if I'm not mistaken, it was last year's State of the State in which he took a turn to the left, and he explicitly said that prisons were not an economic development tool, that there shouldn't be jobs built on the backs of black and brown people. I'm paraphrasing, but he got a big cheer from the folks who were in the audience. It's an election year. Don't you think that you're pushing uphill here a little bit? Do you not expect him to continue that kind of rhetoric?
Again, we're not proposing that the prison industry, the buzzwords of prison industry, or creating facilities just for jobs. We're here to protect the system. We had one of the finest correction systems in the country. What we did back in 2000 with 72,000 inmates was nothing less than heroic. And today, and I would like to point out to the people that say, well, you got 25% less beds, so you need to take down beds. We never had the adequate bed space to house 72,000 inmates. For those of us who worked during that era, we had inmates stacked on top of each other in every nook and cranny, in gymnasiums. The governor's father put in a method of housing inmates in gymnasium. He said he didn't want to do it. He did double bunking. He said he didn't want to do it, but he was out of time and out of space. Today is a day that we have an opportunity to right-size this system. And what we have in the prison system is a more violent offender. Over 70% overall of our inmates are violent offenders. We have assaults on the rise to the point where 5 years ago, when we had 7,000 less inmates, we're at a record level of assaults by the end of this year to match 5 years ago when we had 7,000 more inmates.
What is the population right now?
It's roughly 53,400.
So are you saying then it was overcrowded in 2000 and now it is the appropriate size? I mean, there are empty beds in the system, correct?
There's empty beds because of double bunking. We have over 10,000 inmates in double bunk situations. We have more than 50% of our inmates are never locked in a cell. They're in medium security facilities. They're violent offenders in medium security facilities. They're in dormitories with 60 inmates that were built for 50 inmates, whereas back in 2000, they had 90 inmates in a dorm that were built for 50 inmates.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask you, and I'm not sure if you have an opinion on this, but we spoke recently with Assemblyman Aubrey, and the Assembly had a hearing on the parole board, and we're quite upset about the reduced number of people who are actually getting parole. Is this something that you've got your eye on? Are you concerned about that at all?
Again, it's a public policy. We don't dally in who comes to prison or who leaves prison. Obviously, we're concerned as taxpayers and New Yorkers who is released from facilities, through presumptive release, merit time. There's been alternatives to incarceration. What we have now is a more violent offender. You do not have nonviolent offenders anymore.
Also, though, and you talk a little bit about, this is a budget decision. The governor's trying to realize a series of savings. And in order to have tax cuts and increased spending in education and property tax relief, he needs to realize a $2 billion savings at the end of 2014. He has said that. As homeowners, I mean, certainly your members are homeowners and taxpayers, is that not something that you also want to see?
Obviously, as taxpayers and New Yorkers, we would love to see that. We love to see cut spending, cut taxes, all the buzzwords. But we also want to see safe services, whether it's our prison system or our mental health system. And we, more than anyone, know about cuts and what it can do to a system. And I think we're creating a crisis within these systems with these cuts. It's time to take a step back and look at it and talk with the shareholders.
Okay, well, of course, the budget's coming in January. I'm sure we'll be speaking to you again. Thank you very much
Certainly.
for coming in.
Thank you.